Good afternoon, and thanks again for joining us. I know you didn't hear us originally. Thank you. My name is Libby Hazard, and I'm a SNAP program analyst here at the Food and Nutrition Service. And my colleague, Alice McKenney, who you just heard, is also a program analyst and with us here today. During this call, we're going to discuss basic information and application requirements for the Process and Technology Improvement Grant, which I'll refer to in this webinar by the name PTIG. But before we begin, I wanted to let everyone know that this webinar is being recorded, and this presentation, as well as the audio, will be posted into the grants section on the FNS website. And we will go over that at the end to help you be able to locate that. All phone lines have been muted, and participants are in listen-only mode for this webinar. We welcome you to use the chat feature, which we know you all already know how to use well. Thank you so much. To ask your questions. So if any questions come up, we will try to respond to them at the end. And lastly, we have a lot of information, but it will be online after the web. I will both by email, and I will send the slides by email, and then I will also post the webinar online, as I mentioned. So let's get started. During today's webinar, we'll discuss basic information about the purpose of this grant and who can apply for funding, funding priorities for this year's grant competition. We'll go over the review criteria in a little more detail that will be used by evaluators to assess the applications. And we will go over the application submission procedures and answer as many questions as we can at the end. And we'll try to move quickly and make sure that we have enough time for you for that. The purpose of this grant competition is to develop and implement projects that focus on improving the quality and efficiency of SNAP operations and processes. The eligible entities, the entities that are eligible for the PTIG funding are state agencies that administer SNAP, that's the 53 state agencies, so 50 states, along with DC, Guam, and the Virgin Islands, state or local governments, agencies that provide health or welfare services, public health or educational entities, and private nonprofit entities, which includes community-based or faith-based organizations, food banks, or other emergency feeding organizations. As you can see, there's a broad swath of entities which may apply for a PTIG. I do want to highlight that new in fiscal year 19, entities that received a PTIG award in FY18 will not be eligible to apply this year. This only applies to the lead entity on the award, not to partner organizations or government agencies. Now we will provide you with some more detailed information regarding the awards themselves. PTIGs are subject to the availability of funds. Up to $5 million will be available for this year's grant competition. Grants are awarded through a competitive process. In other words, submitting a proposal does not guarantee funding. There is no cost sharing or cost matching requirement. The funding amount per award is dependent on the number of awards granted. FNS anticipates that we will award between 6 and 11 grants in fiscal year 19. The anticipated funding level per award ranges anywhere from $20,000 to $2 million. In the past, we have awarded a grantee less funds than requested in their proposal. Sometimes this occurred because something a grantee requested funds for wasn't allowable, or the goals of the project could be achieved with less funds. For example, when travel costs for contractors seemed excessive. The project period is for 3 years. All SNAP Process and Technology Improvement Grant funds must be obligated, and all activities under the grant must be completed by September 30th, 2022. If the activities funded under this grant are part of a larger eligibility system project with total projected costs exceeding $6 million, an advanced planning document must be submitted and approved prior to the expenditure of these grant funds. Guidance on the APG process can be found on the FNS website. To read I went forward a little quickly here, but I do want to note that if you want to see a summary about previous projects funded under the PTIGs, you can visit the FY19 PTIG page on our website, and we are going to go through how to get to that website, like I said, so I can highlight that for you then. but it's at the bottom of that landing page. We would like to bring your attention to some funding restrictions that exist for all grantees. Pre-award costs will not be awarded. That is, costs incurred prior to the grant project period begins. Funds are intended for new projects only. Funds cannot be used for ongoing costs of existing projects. Projects that are predicated on waiving SNAP regulations are not allowable, and the funds can only be used for SNAP's share of project costs. That is, if a project includes programs other than SNAP, the budget must show how the costs are allocated among the benefiting programs and demonstrate that this grant is only going to fund SNAP's share of the project costs. And finally, the project cannot devote more than 25% of the requested grant funds to outreach activities, such as informational materials, pure application assistance, screening, pre-qualifying applicants, or activities whose purpose is to attract or recruit SNAP applicants. This is in alignment with overall SNAP outreach guidance. I want to highlight some key dates for you. The completed grant proposals, along with all necessary forms, must be completed and uploaded onto grants.gov by Monday, June 10th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. FNS will announce the recipients of this year's grant no later than September 30th, 2019. The project period of the award is 3 years, beginning September 30th, 2019 through September 30th, 2022. Now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Alice, who's going to talk a little bit about the funding priorities.
Great, thanks, Libby. The funding priorities for this grant competition change each year based on FNS agency priorities and SNAP program needs. This year, projects should prioritize at least one of the following: improving and or modernizing notices, improving customer service, and improving the application and interview process. Proposals must also identify how one or more SNAP certification processes will be improved as a result of the project. So, for example, proposals should explain how the project will improve application intake or application screening, the interview, notices, verifications, client reporting, recertification, client complaints, or the fair hearing process. Projects that target traditionally underserved populations, such as the elderly, disabled, rural communities, and veterans, are especially encouraged to apply. So, the first priority that we will discuss today is to improve and or modernize notices. Proposals that target this priority area might include improvements to the clarity of language on notices that the state provides by utilizing the new FNS SNAP Notice Toolkit. The toolkit is available as an attachment on grants.gov. Projects could also include the implementation of electronic notices through an online account on a secure website or portal, or reminder functions such as text messages. The second priority area for this year is improving customer service. Proposals that target this priority will improve the client experience and might include the modernization or improvement of call centers, client hotlines, or lobby management. It could also include use of interactive voice response technology, enhancing workflows for handling calls, or reducing the time from when a caller dials to when their issue is resolved. Projects could also focus on efforts to reduce the amount of time between when a client applies and a decision is made on their case. And the last priority area that I'll discuss today is to improve the application and interview process. These are projects that enhance conversations between eligibility workers and clients or improve applications. For example, projects could train eligibility workers to improve conversations that occur during interviews to ensure that households are screened for relevant deductions or understand work requirements when applicable. Projects could also train workers on taking steps to ensure clients understand all their rights and responsibilities as a SNAP household. This priority area could also include projects targeted towards improving applications, both online or paper-based, to make them easier to understand and complete. And then, just as an FYI, new this year, proposals that are particularly data-driven will also be awarded up to 3 bonus points, beyond a possible 100 during the scoring process. This could include incorporating user experience testing or having conducted research in advance of submission of a proposal in order to more accurately identify the quantifiable problem that the proposed solution is intended to solve. Inclusion of specific quantifiable statistics to bolster the argument that the proposed project is necessary in order to better serve SNAP clients may earn additional points. So just to recap, all applications must support efforts by state agencies and community-based and faith-based partners to develop and implement projects that focus on improving the quality and efficiency of SNAP operations and processes. Grant proposals must be submitted to grants.gov by Monday, June 10th by 11:59 p.m. Eastern. There are no extensions on the deadline. The RFA includes a detailed checklist that will help applicants ensure their proposals meet all the necessary requirements. And you can find this checklist on page Roman numeral 3 of the RFA. We really do recommend that you take some time to review and read the RFA in full. If you have read it already, you'll notice that a lot of what we're saying might sound familiar. And it's, if you've got any questions in the meantime, feel free to throw them in that chat box and we'll get them at the end of the session. So now I'll pass it back to Libby.
Thanks, Alice. We're going to talk about review criteria now that the proposals will be judged on. A review panel will be convened to evaluate proposals successfully submitted to grants.gov by the deadline. Incomplete or late proposals will not be considered. The review criteria discussed in this webinar is based on the application content that is outlined in the RFA. For more information, please see the RFA. I think we've made that clear for you guys, sorry. The review panel will evaluate each grant application based on how well it addresses each of the following evaluation criteria. So as we go through the review criteria over the next few slides, we want to also apply this criteria to a sample project to help you better understand what we will be looking for as we analyze your proposals. Do not copy this project verbatim for your state, however innovative. Innovative, well-researched projects of this type are welcome to enter the grant competition. The example project we will use for discussion purposes is creating a worker dashboard to better monitor applications. The first part of the review criteria that I'm going to talk about is the project design section. This section is the most heavily weighted section of the evaluation criteria. This section essentially contains an analysis of the problem and how the project you're proposing will help solve the problem. The proposal should include and clearly describe the problem to be solved, and provide evidence that the proposed approach is well suited to solve the identified issue. The RFA offers specific criteria for the project design section. So here we have an example of the project design section. So in our not as great example, a proposal might identify what they're going to do, what they're going to create. The worker dashboard is going to be created, but they don't show exactly how it's going to be implemented. There aren't clear letters of commitment or endorsement. They're just templates. In an example that would receive more points, the proposal really lays out how the application processing timelines are going to be set up, includes measurable and attainable quantifiable goals. The full project timeline is included, and those letters of commitment are personalized and show that there's this foundation of a relationship that's going to move this project forward. Also, we want to make a quick note on letters that may be required for you to submit with your proposal, depending on your situation. If a state agency submits an application in partnership with another organization, the state must provide a letter of commitment from the proposed partner. State agencies submitting an application on their own do not need a letter of commitment. Letters may be addressed to the FNS grant officer, Kimberly Shields. Also, FNS welcomes grant proposals from entities other than a state agency. Such applicants must demonstrate that the state agency strongly endorses and/or is involved in the proposed project through a letter of endorsement. It must also describe how the project will support the state's current or planned technology improvement efforts and priorities. Again, those letters can be addressed to Kimberly Shields, and that's in the RFA information on her contact information. The next review criteria we will discuss is organizational experience, staff capability, and management. The narrative provided in your proposal should provide enough detail for reviewers to easily understand who is managing this project and the time commitment it will involve. Proposals should also include a detailed internal and, if applicable, external communications plan. Again, we have using our example, and in this example, if a proposal that wouldn't receive as many points would just list employees, you wouldn't be able to tell what their roles are, what they're going to be doing on the project. You wouldn't necessarily have job descriptions for them. So really low on information, and the communication plan doesn't have detailed regular check-ins or a plan for how internal communication would happen. And in a better example, proposal would clearly identify all the parties and provide those job descriptions that I mentioned, make it really clear who are all the players and who's going to be participating so that we can understand how the project is going to move forward, and include that important communication plan. The next review criteria is evaluation. In addition to prioritizing cost effectiveness and demonstrating that the anticipated results are commensurate with the cost of the project, FNS is looking for proposals that include comprehensive evaluation plans. All proposals must include a comprehensive evaluation process that is specific, data-driven, and measures whether the problem identified is addressed by the proposed project intervention, and tracks activities and indicators using the activities tracker included in the RFA. Evaluation will fall into two buckets this year, which we will discuss on the next slide. This year, as I mentioned in the last slide, there are new requirements for evaluation, and they're intended to capture both process and outcome measures. So to help make this a little easier to digest, we've tried to bucket this into two categories. The first is the activities tracker, which you'll see on the left, number one, and that will assist you in reporting on process measures. This is the new portion this year. So using the activity tracker, we'd like you to map your proposed activities and indicators of success to the objective/priority areas you chose. So when Alice went over the priority areas, when we're thinking about the activities tracker, priority areas and objectives are one and the same. So if you choose priority area 1 to improve or modernize notices, that's your objective number 1. You are not required to have more than one objective, so you can choose only one priority area, but you can choose more if you'd like. However, for each objective, there must be at least one proposed activity and at least one proposed indicator, which shouldn't be difficult if your project will be centered around that priority area, so you will likely have those pretty easily. An indicator is any metric that you anticipate you will be able to track during the period of performance. You can also see Appendix B of the RFA for a sample of what the reporting form will look like, and how these activities and indicators will be pulled in, just to give you some context to guide you as you complete the activities tracker. We'll talk more about the reporting form at the end of the presentation. Also on the slide, you'll see an example of how to use the activity tracker. So we have an objective is priority area 2, improve customer service, and the proposed example activity is to provide iPads to lobby staff in order to improve customer service. Indicator 1 would be that 16 iPads were purchased, and indicator 2 would be wireless connectivity added to 6 buildings. So you can see that those are mostly process related. So the second category is overall success or outcome measures from your project. So please outline, in addition to doing the activities tracker, please outline for us in your proposal how overall success will be measured at the completion of the project. So this could include, for the project that I used as an example here, that could include, it might be a reduction in lobby wait times, an increase in completed tasks in the lobby because of the access to the iPad. We did want to note that and make sure it's clear that the completion of the activities tracker in the format that we provided in the RFA is required for your submission. This is kind of an overall, going back to our first example of including in your evaluation for your review criteria, when you're looking at those outcome measures, you want an evaluation plan that's detailed, that includes, pre and post surveys as an example. You want to include in-house or contracted out evaluation consultant for more rigorous analysis. So this is an example of a really strong application. You might not always in every situation, but you want to make clear that you're demonstrating how you're going to measure the success of your project. So the second most heavily weighted item we will be scoring your proposals on is your budget, appropriateness, and economic efficiency. Proposal submissions which omit the required budget forms, budget narratives, and/or line item descriptions will not receive the full point value for this criterion. Therefore, applicants should recognize that a well-written budget narrative which justifies proposed project expenditures assists reviewers during the review process. The RFA outlines additional requirements if proposals include indirect costs, if the proposal includes indirect costs, projects that include programs other than SNAP, larger budgets, and nonprofit applicants or partners. Information about these items, should the proposal include them, should be within your budget section as well. Applicants that are required to issue bids should provide a narrative explaining the requirement and provide a reasonable estimate of contractual and consultant costs. The slide lists what specific information about consultant or contract workers should be included in your proposal, and that's also in the RFA. Nothing that's in here isn't in the RFA in terms of those types of requirements. We have another example slide. We don't want to see budget narratives that are really non-descriptive, or items from the budget checklist in the RFA are missing from the line item budget, or justifications not provided for cost estimates. In a good example, we might see a budget narrative that addresses all substantial or notable portions of the line item budget. So the narrative and the line item budget match. We can see the items on the line item budget are addressed in the narrative, and we can clearly make those connections. So we're not wondering, what's this item here? So that includes the reasoning, as I mentioned, for consultants and employees, and generally easy to understand. And make sure that your travel costs are inclusive and that justification is provided. We've included a budget checklist in the RFA to help applicants demonstrate to the review panel that they have put effort into determining what they will need to spend and for what purpose. It seems simple, but sometimes budgets clearly lack simple items that are mentioned elsewhere in the proposal, which can hurt your score for your proposal. Please be sure to take the time and make sure that all components of your proposal are in alignment. The last review criteria is presentation. Presentation seems easy, and it is as long as you take the time to double check before submission. Project description should be no more than 25 pages. This does not include the cover sheet, table of contents, required forms, or other appendices. All pages, including the form pages, must be numbered. We mentioned this at the beginning of the presentation, but just a reminder that proposals that are particularly data-driven will be awarded up to 3 bonus points beyond a possible 100 during the review process. I'm going to turn it over to Alice to tell you a little more about application processing.
Great. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about how to submit your application and some other additional information. So as noted earlier, there are going to be some new reporting requirements in fiscal year 19. A sample form for this reporting requirement is located in Appendix B of the RFA. Training on this form will be provided to grantees after the PTIG grants are awarded, but we did want to provide this form to you as a reference as you develop your activities tracker. The activities tracker and the reporting form are going to tie into each other. Also, in terms of forms, required forms for your application, the standard forms in the 424 family are available on grants.gov under the tab entitled Forms. If your organization is not a state agency, please be aware that you're also required to submit an AD 3030 with your application package. Also, the grant program accounting system and financial capability questionnaire can be found on pages 25 to 26 of the RFA and is required for all applicants. And then also, please be aware, in order to submit an application via grants.gov, applicants must have a DUNS number, which is the Data Universal Numbering System, and they must also be registered in the new Systems for Award Management, SAM, and on grants.gov. So it's a lot of different places to register, so we want to try to help break it down a little bit for you. Obtaining a DUNS number might take several days, but in order to register in SAM, you're going to need your tax number, your DUNS number, and you'll also need your tax ID number and your taxpayer name. So be sure to get your DUNS first and then do your SAM. For new SAM registrants and those updating or renewing their registration in SAM, in order to deter and prevent fraudulent activity, you're now required to mail in a notarized letter identifying that you are the authorized entity administrator for the entity associated with that DUNS number. This letter must be received by SAM before the registration will be activated in the system. We anticipate that this might cause a delay in the application process, so please do this early. For more information, visit sam.gov, and the new requirement is at the top of the page. Verification takes at least 48 hours after SAM registration is submitted, and applicants must have a valid SAM registration no later than 3 days prior to the application due date. And then lastly, the registration process for grants.gov generally takes between 3 to 5 business days. So as you can see, to get these three systems up and running, they each take a couple of days on their own. So, you know, while you're working up your proposals, we would also highly recommend making sure that you have all these other administrative pieces in order so that you are able to get that application in by the deadline. You do not need to have a final proposal in order to register in SAM or obtain that DUNS number. And then this is an FYI, all applicants must follow grants.gov guidance on file naming conventions. To avoid submission issues, please follow the guidance provided in the grants.gov frequently asked questions page. And then before we take questions, we wanted to show you how to navigate to the PTIG webpage on the Food and Nutrition Service website, which was recently relaunched in case you haven't looked at it in the last couple of weeks. So starting from the FNS homepage, which is fns.usda.gov, you'll select the Grants tab at the top of the page. You'll then see a drop-down under Grants, and you'll just click the word Grants in that drop-down. Again, it seems kind of silly, but that's how it's built right now. And then once you click on that Grants word, the tab will take you to a list of open grants at FNS. You'll select the FY19 SNAP Process and Technology Improvement Grants link that was posted on April 11th. And then that will take you to the PTIG landing page, which you see here. The PTIG landing page includes links to apply for a grant, all the required forms, this webinar recording as well as the recording from last week, and information about past PTIG recipients.
Yeah, this is the page that I kept referencing and saying we'll show you at the end. This is where those past participants projects will be if you'd like to see those. And then here's just a couple of quick reference links. We think some of these might be helpful, but just don't worry about writing them down right now. We'll email these slides out after the webinar. And then if you have any questions, it's that time. Please send them to us using the chat feature in WebEx. We're happy to answer any questions that you might have. And I think we have a couple that came in. One is whether we can repeat what we said about not being eligible if you received an award in 2018. So I can certainly repeat that. New in FY19, entities that received a PTIG award in FY18 will not be eligible to apply this year. It's just for FY19. And this only applies to the lead entity on the award, so not to partner organizations or government agencies. If you were a partner, whoever was the lead entity is one that's not eligible. And if you're unsure if you fall in that bucket or not, you can shoot us an email and we'll let you know. Yeah, feel free. And then the second question is, can we use this same DUNS number and SAM from last year? And I believe the answer is yes. And Alice is also shaking her head. So I'm sure they have their own like time periods, but it shouldn't be.
Yeah, I'm actually not sure how long those numbers last, but it's definitely more than a year.
Yeah, definitely. If it was new last year, it will certainly be still working this year, but if it's been longer than that, we can't say for certain, because I'm sure there's at some point where you have to renew, but it should be fine. Okay.
So we'll wait for additional questions. So I saw somebody just ask, what is the website where you can rewatch this WebEx? And it's actually just the PTIG website. We're going to have it linked up there. If you want immediate gratification, because it might take us a couple of days to get the link to this particular recording on our website, we already have the recording for the webinar that we held last week up there.
Yeah.
And it was the exact same content.
It's right. This is an old screenshot, of course, because I made this presentation before. We added this link, but where it says May 6th and the webinar registration was located, that now has the previous webinar, and then the same thing will be added to the May 14th. It'll just take us a little time to get it out there.
Again, if you've got any other questions, feel free to throw them in the chat online.
A couple more minutes. And like Alice said, we are available by email and can respond to inquiries by email. You have our emails here. If something comes up after the presentation or you think it's more specific to your project and would like to ask us more specific questions, that is fine. Take 2 more seconds. Okay, well, it looks like those are all the questions. If for some reason we missed one in the chat or Q&A box, and you don't feel like your question was answered or you have further questions, please email us at the emails here. You can also find those in the RFA, I believe. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to the proposal. Thank you. And thank you for your patience during our technical issues.